Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero. I'm going to take a bit of an aside before we start today's episode. Two things. First of all, there's a controversy surrounding Nike right now, and I just want to say that I support Colin Kaepernick. If you listen to the show, you know Pete and his history of military service, and you know that we are 100% behind our veterans, and that we have many guests and friends of the show in the Special Forces community, including Nate Boyer. You know that I'm surrounded in my life by law enforcement and military service people, and I'm telling you that if you're offended by NFL players taking a knee, or if you don't know Nate Boyer, you probably don't know the whole story, and I implore you to reach out to me so we can talk about it. You might change my mind, or I might change yours, or neither. Either way, hit me up. The other thing is, just about every day we get an email or a call from a press agent, and we love press agents because they do the hard job of wrangling some very busy clients who are often promoting a product in 100 different places. But everyone we have on our show is special to us, and every product we help them promote, we do so because we really believe in it. And we know that you're going to have a great time with it, or it's going to enhance your life somehow. We're certainly not the only ones. You don't get on Rogan or Corolla or More Stories or Tim Ferriss unless they believe in you and your product. But we've had a pretty amazing run lately. Scott Husing, who will absolutely open your eyes, and his book Echo and Ramadi will entertain and stimulate your mind in ways that you will not expect. Sebastian Younger and his book Tribe will help you make sense of the way we treat each other. Cornell Carter is my favorite soul singer, and his album One Love is a beautiful exploration of a timeless message. Jim DeFelice and his book West Like Lightning is an intimate account of something we've glorified for a century, and for good reason. That book is terrific. Daryl Anders and Agape Soul, their album Conversation is nothing short of masterful. You should get these products. They will touch you and expand your mind. Today's guest is Romal Tune, and his book is called Love is an Inside Job. This book has had a profound impact on my life and helps me to reflect on the stage I find myself in right now. I'm endorsing it for what it's done for me, and I'm saying you should get it right now for what it might do to you, to your relationships, and to your view of yourself. The easiest place to get it is on Amazon. Again, it's called Love is an Inside Job, and you should get it. I strongly suggest you get it. Like many of our guests, Romal has become a friend, and I think you're going to really enjoy the conversation we captured the very first time we met face to face. So without further ado,
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Proof.
This is Bryce Vine.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This
East.
is Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Marotta.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
This is Dr. Bob Greenberg.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
Hey, this is Romal Tune, and you're listening to The Break It Down Show.
And now, The Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
Romal Tune is an author and a man of the cloth. He's a graduate of both Howard and Duke. You got a master's in divinity from Duke, right?
Yeah, I did.
And what did you study at Howard?
I was a pre-med major, which meant I double majored nursing and biology.
And biology.
Yeah, I was a medic in the Army, so I wanted to do the nursing thing to make ends meet while I prepared for med school.
Because you like easy topics. Your book is one that I've had the pleasure of reading, and it's really something else. The book is called Love is an Inside Job, Getting Vulnerable with God. And that is a heady title. But I didn't approach it that way. I approached it with a light heart, and I didn't want to burden my experience with, having to try too hard. So I just cracked the book open and I started reading it. I read pretty quickly, and I had to savor it because reading quickly did not do justice to the experience. You went really deep.
Yeah, and I've heard that from a lot of people who read the book that say, it's only 300 pages, but they expected a quick read, and many people have had to put it down, reflect, and there's a lot in there, and I did go deep, and I wanted it to be an extremely honest and transparent book so that it could really help people.
Well, the transparency had to have been cathartic because you didn't just go deep in the topics of reflection, of therapy, of what it means to bring your whole self to your faith experience. In fact, honestly, I didn't focus on the faith experience part of it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a big part of your journey,
Yeah.
but it was not the essence of your journey. It was more like you brought yourself to the church, not the other way around.
Absolutely, man. I think that for me, my whole story was not a faith journey. You know, I didn't grow up that way. I grew up, you know, with a lot of challenging life experiences, and I wanted to bring all of me to the book and just really have a conversation with people. I think the world needs more honesty and transparency. People are looking for the human side of, you know, what does this journey look like? And can anyone relate and understand, you know, what I'm going through? And so I just felt like there are conversations that people wish they could have and things that they wish they could talk about. And I wanted to own all of my truth and not hide any of it. And for me, it was an invitation to other people to say, hey, just, you know, own your truth, own your story. And I think you'll find that there's content in there that could help someone else.
Absolutely. I think I want to acknowledge before we go further that we have a house full of people here.
Yeah.
And you came to my house for breakfast. Man, thank you for joining me for breakfast. I really appreciate you guys coming all the way over here.
Man, thanks for breakfast. That was really good.
You've reunited me. Actually, she introduced us, but this excuse has reunited me with Lisa Grant, who I've known since the 4th grade. We went to Federal Terrace together, and we haven't really seen each other since we became adults.
Yeah, you guys have known each other longer than I think Lisa and I met when I moved to Vallejo. I was in about 8th grade.
8th grade?
Yeah. She lived across the track, so to speak.
Okay.
And we became friends through mutual friends.
What do you mean by across the tracks, so to speak?
Yeah, well, I lived in one of the neighborhoods that would be, it was, you know, the Crest. The country club Crest. Granted, there was nothing country club about it.
Right.
But
Boy, that got a fancy name.
You're right. What a fancy name for a very challenging place. But Lisa lived across the highway, if you will, in another neighborhood. That was, you know, a pretty nice neighborhood, pretty safe.
Where did Lisa live? College Park or Cimarron Hills?
I think it was College Park.
Yeah.
So I would cross.
College Park. You know, it was a challenge, too.
Yeah.
I mean, Vallejo was a challenge.
Yeah, we'd have to ask her, which I don't think it was there then, because our neighborhood was pretty, like, at night, it was still safe to go over there.
Yes, that's true.
In my neighborhood, I had to maneuver my way through. You had to
maneuver, yeah.
And so we became friends, and she went to a high school across town from where I went to school. And, we just became cool.
So for our listeners, I want to say we're not going to hometown out.
We're not going to,
we will a little bit. But your journey brought you through Vallejo as a kid, but you didn't stay here too long.
No. So my journey brought me from San Francisco to Vallejo. I was just taking my fiance, who's in town with me, Marche, through the city. And showing her all the different places I lived in different schools. You know, from kindergarten through 10th grade, I went to a different school every year and lived in a different neighborhood. And so we pretty much rode all over San Francisco. And then because of my mom's issues with addiction and alcoholism, I ended up having to live with my grandparents. We lost everything. And my grandparents lived in Vallejo and the Crest. And that's where I lived from about 8th grade until 10th grade, and then met my dad and moved to New Jersey.
So when you were here, you moved into a neighborhood that had its challenges. You were not a stranger to adversity, so you knew what that was about.
Yeah, as I talk about, love is an inside job is a journey through that stuff. You know, I grew up around issues of addiction and drugs and alcoholism. So knew how to more so navigate people based on what they were dealing with to make sure that I was okay. So a lot of those experiences were really molding my identity in terms of how I related to people, my issues of trust, my issues of vulnerability or strength and manhood and relationships.
And your very definitions of those things.
Yeah, and what I believe to be true about people, and in turn shaped what I believe to be true about myself and people who come from experiences and backgrounds like mine.
Yeah.
And, I think for many of us, the challenge is just that. our family environments not only tell us what our beliefs will be about other people, but also shape our beliefs about ourselves.
Absolutely.
And who we can become in the world, what we can and can't do in the world. And so the book is a journey of revisiting those experiences and trying to find a way to feel better about me and a way to let go of those things from my story that just don't serve me well.
Yeah. The fact that you're here doing this show is, our show's endorsement of your book. But I want to say that it goes far beyond that for me, because in my experience of reading the book, I had to slow down. And that is, I think, indicative of the meaning that lives in that book. And what I hope for the book is that, one of the recurring things that happens on our show is we run into people who produce something of tremendous quality. We've been very fortunate to meet people who have done things that are terrific. Sometimes those people have achieved commercial success with that product. And sometimes we look at whatever the effort was and we think, man, I wish that would have gone much further than it did. I think that with the way that you've written the book, and it's such an intimate look at your life, what I hope for the book is that it crosses all of the boundaries, because I want people from all cultures. I want people who don't understand the experience of growing up in a rough environment, because a lot of people who grow up with some amount of privilege, no matter how much. Your book is not about race.
Nah, not at all.
Your book is about experience. And what I think somebody will be able to understand in that experience is that regardless of what your racial background is, when you have to grow up in a struggle, it does create definitions for you about yourself.
Yeah. And not even just in struggle. Like my hope is that people understand that this book, the title is Love is an Inside Job, Getting Vulnerable with God. To understand that even if you're not a God person, you can get something from this book through the stories. Mm-hmm. It's not simply a faith book. This is learning to love yourself in an authentic way, learning to love even your broken places. It's not about poverty. It's not about race. It's not about even struggle. It's about the human journey, the human condition, to realize that I have friends who grew up very wealthy, and, they're not African American. And they will read this book and say, man, our lives were totally different, but I found myself in this book. Mm-hmm. Why? Because the human condition is the human condition. Yeah. All of us have life experiences that have put some kinks in the armor, that have created our anxieties, our doubts, our fears, our beliefs about ourselves. And, those moments when you're sitting and feeling like, life should be good if I look at everything around me, but there's something in me that's still unsettled. Yeah. This book is a journey to say yes, and it's tied to some experiences that are still showing up in your life and you don't even realize it. Some beliefs that you have accepted as true about you and you don't know how to let go of. And that was my story too. Yeah. And so here's how I found the courage to confront those stories, those that were suppressed or ignored, because I truly in my lifetime wanted to know what real happiness and real love felt like before my time is up. And I'm committed to that. And I think that this is really an invitation to other people to say, hey, all of us hope we live a long and prosperous life, but we don't know how much time we get. And since I don't know, I don't want to assume that I have days to waste. And I notice in some ways I'm getting in my own way through my thoughts and beliefs about me that are keeping me from the happiness I really desire. And here's my journey. Here are some stories that I had to confront and release myself from to be fully present and fully love all of me and fully be present to other people.
I want to give an example because I think this rings true with everybody, regardless of background, gender, anything, is that you are clearly well-spoken, insightful, intelligent guy. But as you grew up, you didn't have very many people, especially outside of your household, ever acknowledge that you were a smart guy. Nah. And that paints a picture for a kid that really sometimes creates some impenetrable walls. And if we have a problem in this society that I think we can solve without having to dedicate a bunch of resource that people are politically going to fight over, it's that we really need to let kids have a path to some success that's not hindered by just the fact that we don't tell them that they're capable.
Man, yeah, we have to, and most of the time as adults, I have 2 children who are practically adults now. My daughter, Aman, is 19, and she's going into her junior year of college. My son, Jordan's about to become a freshman at Morehouse College. And I realized that for a long time, I was raising them emotionally the way I was raised. I was uncomfortable with affection. I was uncomfortable with words of love and affirmation. I grew up in an environment where men didn't do that, and that was a sign of weakness, not realizing that those skills of emotional health and affection and love help people become whole human beings and to live into loving relationships and know how they should be treated and how they should be talked to, spoken to in terms of what love and affection looks and feels like. So I had to deal with a lot of my story of my upbringing. My family, my grandparents raised me when I had to go live with them. Mm-hmm. And, their thing was like, look, we don't do all that loving and hugging and I love you and you're great. We love you because you get to live here.
Yeah,
right?
they provided for you.
You live in our house, you eat our food, we buy your clothes. That's what love looks like, right? And if we didn't love you, you wouldn't get to live indoors.
Right.
And, life was really about work, provide for your family, do the best that you can.
Yeah.
No talk of happiness and, be happy and be fulfilled in life. No. So I inherited a story that even when I became an adult, my story said life is just work, provide, and sometimes life is hard. So even when life was good, I had this expectation that one day a challenge is going to show up that could potentially ruin everything. And I imposed that on my journey. And I realized that life was hard for them, but it didn't have to be hard for me. And I didn't have to live into that story.
We are the first generation, I think, that openly tells our children that we love them. Because, I grew up like that. Everybody in my neighborhood grew up like that. Your parents provided for you. They clearly loved you, or so the implication was. And just the exercise of affection, that just wasn't a thing back then. I tell my dad I love him now, but when we were growing up, we didn't say it to each other. I wasn't conditioned to say it. And I think that that this generation's very lucky. I see my kids; they're very, open with their affections towards us and towards each other and towards other people. But I remember the first time, I was told by another man, "Hey, I love you," and I thought, "Okay, I love you too." And I, thought that, said it. It was like that was kind of weird. I didn't quite know how to take. What do you mean, man? But it's something that even our closest friends, as we were growing up, we're the generation that's turning that corner.
That's turning that corner and realizing, man, that it's not an either or proposition. And what I mean by that is to be fully a man and, the whole male paradigm we're nurtured into, you can be strong and confident and be compassionate and affectionate. It's not an either or. You can be both. You can be whole and it doesn't mean that you show up in every situation all affectionate and loving and empathy.
Yeah.
But you know how to lay down your armor for the people who have earned the right for you to for you to let them into that space, that heart space, and then pick up your armor when it's time to go out and face the world. But even in business, emotional intelligence is becoming a big thing now in the workplace, and empathy and those skills of leadership that allow people to follow in spite of challenging conditions because they believe in the leader and they feel connected. I think that for our generation, there's an opportunity for us to own our truth and own our stories and really be courageous enough to become our best selves. I grew up in an environment where that affection and love stuff didn't happen. And I have friends now who I was really uncomfortable with when they would say, "Man, I love you," and I was like, "Well, what's that about? Like,
Yeah.
why is this
Come on,
grown
man.
man saying he loves?"
Man,
And then they were huggers. And one friend, Joe, in particular, he's one of those real huggers. You know, I have like 4 categories of hugs. Like one is, you know, you read about it in Love Is an Inside Job. There's the 3-second rule. You know, I count to 3 seconds and let you go before it gets awkward. Then there's the athletic hug where I'll, you know, one handshake, pat you on the back like I'm burping you.
Right.
And then there is the stranger danger, where people come full frontal and they hug and hold on. And then there's the, you know, the church hug. People hug sideways.
Yeah, the side hug.
Side hug. But Joe was one of those affectionate people who would hug and not let go, and he'd be talking to you while he's holding you. And I was like, this is freaking me out. Like, what is wrong with this dude? And I wanted to know, like, why does this bother me so much? And I realized that I was living into a story that taught me affection was weak or unsafe space, and not normal for men. And that allowed me to have my male relationships really disconnected. Everything, friendship was around sports and entertainment and talking about women, but never really being able to say to my friends, "Hey man, life is hard right now and I'm a little scared, or I'm nervous about this."
Especially not scared.
Nah, that was met with just man up.
Yeah.
And we accept those things as true without ever questioning them. And then what happens as adults, we end up carrying this weight and these burdens, and we were told that that's what we're supposed to do, and we never ask why. And I started asking, like, why is it that I have to carry stuff? Why can't I release it? Why can't I talk about it? If releasing it and talking about it is going to help me deal with it better and feel lighter and enjoy life, I'm going to now, as a man who gets to make my own decisions, create my own rules.
That's really big. I think if you can sum up the big takeaway. No, that's not true. There's a lot of big takeaways in the book. I think there are a lot of big takeaways out of the book, and your ability to take something away is really going to depend on, and I'm talking to our listeners, depend on your experience and which parts of it you relate to. I was kind of amazed at which parts of it I related to, and I almost want to say nothing more than that, but I will just say...
Yeah, I'm curious.
I'll touch on it by saying that with regard to a journey that's so personal and you were so open in sharing it, it's going to make everybody who reads it ask a different set of questions of themselves.
Yeah, and that's exactly the intent. You know,
was it the intent when you started, though?
It was always the intent. It was... For me, when I sat down to write this book, the decision was based on the fact that I know I'm not the only one in the world who has been living through the lens of what I call a past-driven present life. That the way I was living my life was really being orchestrated by a set of stories and beliefs that my family and my upbringing taught me to accept as true.
And that's universal.
And that's universal. And I wanted to play the lead in my life and no longer be a character trapped in someone else's play.
And that, for the courageous, is hopefully the goal.
Yeah, and I knew that would require some loss, because people are uncomfortable when you don't fit into their norm of what life should look like and who you should be in the world based on their worldview. But I wanted to be free, unapologetically and authentically me. And I'm always, a friend of mine said, "You are more conscious of your mortality than anyone I know." I'm always mindful of, this is the only shot at life I'm going to get. And I want to leave on empty. I don't want to finish my story realizing that no one really knew me because I had so many walls up that I never let anyone in. And I never really allowed myself to fully know them. I want to remove those walls, and I want to leave on empty. I want to be able to say, I lived a hell of a life. I was fully present. I had amazing relationships, and people knew me. There's a thing, I believe it's in Love Is an Inside Job, where I do this, what I call a 6-word legacy sentence. And it goes like this real quick. At the end of your life, everyone will have something to say about you. And typically what they say about you can be summed up in a 6-word sentence. He was this, or he was that, she was this, or she was that. And he said, but at the end of your life, you get to determine what those 6 words will be. And a friend of mine took me through the process, and I came up with my 6 words. my 6 words are really, Romal helps hurting people find healing. And I do that through various ways, through books, through training, through coaching, what have you. And I shared it with my friend. He said, now, the thing about it is when you come up with your 6-word legacy sentence, every day that you get up, your assignment is to make those 6 words true in terms of what people will say about you. So every interaction you have, be it at work, with your family, with friends, with a stranger, you want to show up living into a story that when you walk away, you're leaving behind the best story of you could possibly leave behind with that person. Because your every part of your journey and every interaction leaves behind a piece of your legacy, your story with those people. And so that's kind of, I'm mindful of that every day, that this is how I want to be remembered. This is the story I want the world to know about me. And I want people to lean in and do that for themselves. You know, this whole book is really an invitation to look at your story. I talk about therapy a lot.
Yeah.
And break down the stereotypes and assumptions around emotional health that we've accepted as true. You know, therapy is for people who are weak, there's something wrong with you. And here's the thing, John, every leader I've talked to who's successful has had a therapist. And not because they were going through something, but it's because it kept them balanced and helped them to get another perspective and to talk about things they couldn't talk about somewhere else. A friend of mine who's a professor, she said, my therapist is my compassionate witness. You know, someone who can listen with compassion and empathy, not trying to fix you or judge you, but allow you to talk through some things and then find your own way. And so I decided that's going to be my story. I'm not accepting this narrative that this isn't good for me.
Okay, so 2 things. Number 1, man, you get on my nerves. Because now I have to, you know, I mean, you've just forced me to take a mental inventory of the way that I have left people. And naturally, the first things that pop into my head are people that, you know, people I've mistreated, or people who I left incomplete, or people whose transaction I never brought all the way to a conclusion. And so that's annoying. But the other thing is not to drag other people's business into the mix. But Christy started going to therapy, and she's experiencing some kind of awakening right now. And when I asked, you know, why? What are you sorting out? Because she's, you know, I mean, to me, healthy, and we talk about things, and, you know, I mean, there aren't any emotional spaces that I think are, you know, damaged or off limits or any of those things. We go through those things. She said instead that, you know, she's not working out something that she's been through. There's something about going into something new and going into it with some perspective. And the thing about therapy that people don't think about too much is that it's not about fixing all the time. Sometimes it's about somebody who's just had some training in sorting things out, helping you to sort out whatever you need to do.
Absolutely, man. Like I talk to my therapist about everything, especially when I have these doubts about what I can and can't do, or anxieties, or, you know, with my fiance, for example, I asked her out 2 years ago because of my therapist. I didn't think, you know, she's pretty well known in the city and, you know, has a restaurant. So
your therapist does do some amount of fixing.
He does some fixing in terms of getting me to see myself through a bigger lens and to not doubt myself. And when I do, question, where does this doubt come from? And realizing that having these doubts and fears aren't serving me well to living the life that I want. So I can choose to free myself up from that doubt and believe that I am good enough, that I can do something, that I am worthy, that I'm smart enough, that this dream is for me too. And so, you know,
so some people would say, though, that's none of your therapist's business to be nudging you in that direction and say, go ask her out. But the reality is, it wasn't the asking her out was really peripheral to the issue of you are worthy.
Right. That's what my therapist's role was, to get me to see that my belief was that she wouldn't go out with a guy like me, you know. And he was like, well, you haven't even talked to her and given her the opportunity to choose. That's how you feel about yourself. You're telling yourself that certain people would not want you.
Now, this is something, again, that is universal, but it's not only personal, it's professional. Because a lot of our listeners out there are probably challenged with, I don't know, maybe somebody's not great at selling and you suddenly find yourself an entrepreneur and you never considered yourself a salesperson, but you have to go sell your business to other people, or whatever the professional challenge is, getting along with coworkers or something you have to navigate at work. But you're really talking about, that sums it up so beautifully. You're not giving the person, you might be right. Maybe she won't say yes. Maybe, but right now, it's your opinion of your own self is that person's not going to say yes.
That's it. When you're talking about business, being an entrepreneur or, an innovative person or a creative, and you tell yourself, oh, I can't do this, or I'm not good at sales. The question is like, why are you choosing to believe that? Who told you that? And why are you accepting it as true?
Yeah.
What would happen if you decided that you could do well and that you are good at sales? What would you go out and do if you started from the place of, I'm capable and I can do this, and released yourself from this belief that you can't, or you're not good enough, or, confronting that story that is the root source of this belief about yourself. Like, who told you you couldn't do it? And why did you accept it as true? Like, the hell with that. Like, yes, you can. And because you believe you can. And now you're taking control of the story and writing your own script. You're not trapped in someone else's play.
The concept of turning in on empty was touched on by a person who's been on a show before. Previous guest named Laird Hamilton. And he was talking about from a physical sense. He's not going to give up on his body as it ages because he's in his 50s now and in incredible shape. And he keeps doing it because his belief is that he is betraying all that he's been given if he doesn't turn it in empty.
Yeah.
And I think that we could do a whole, that could be the theme of an entire podcast. Turn it in empty.
Yeah. You want to, and the way to do that, I believe that, one, my life is so different now, not because so much has changed, but because I've changed how I feel about me. And, love is an inside job is just that, realizing that everything you really desire and really want really starts from dealing with the stories that have shaped how you feel about you, the beliefs that have shaped you. And when you do that, confronting those stories frees you up. You're no longer carrying this weight. And it allows you to be present, to go out and try, to be grateful. I'm grateful for so much now. Life was very hard growing up, but I live a pretty amazing life. And I can see that now and appreciate it now because I'm not expecting life to be hard. I'm not anticipating struggle. I'm not carrying stuff that isn't mine. I'm playing the lead in my life now. And so this love is an inside job thing is really, as people read the book, my hope is that they spend time reflecting and looking at their story and saying, man, there is more to me that I want to tap into. And there actually have been some stories that I've repressed or suppressed or ignored that are still showing up. And I desire freedom. I desire peace of mind. And so I'm going to revisit these stories one last time. And as much as it might hurt or disrupt me, when I'm done confronting them, that will be the last time I have to deal with them. And that's what this is about. Just look at those stories one last time, honestly, and realize this is how they shaped me. And I'm choosing to let my identity free from those beliefs and those experiences so that I am no longer a character trapped in a play that's being orchestrated by my past, that I am taking control of the story.
So that has been that is the theme of the journey that you describe in the book. Love is an Inside Job is such a good title. Was it that from the beginning? Did you title the book, or did you write it first and go, I know what I'm going to call it?
This book took 3 years. Before it got published with Hachette Book Group, I had 4 iterations of it, and then they received the book and they wanted me to do more work to it, but I didn't have a title, and I wrestled with titles, and my agent read the manuscript, and he was like, this book is about love and an internal journey. And he was like, I think the big title for this is Love is an Inside Job.
Oh, boy.
The getting vulnerable with God part was they wanted to, because there's a faith component, and I confront faith a little differently from what I think people would expect, because my journey with faith is I question it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I look at the ways as an adult when I came into faith, its positive impact and its negative influence, and I confront it all. And one of the chapters of the book, but that getting vulnerable with God piece was really something that they wanted to add to it. But I always tell people, don't get caught up on the God language, because you'll find that this book is way bigger than that. Look at the stories and realize that this is a book of truth, authenticity. People say it's raw and deeply honest. Some people say, I can't believe you would tell the world these things. But I do it to invite people on a journey to look at even the ugly parts of your story. And the fact that you're still here just shows how amazing you are, that even in the midst of that mess, you're a miracle. And that's not something that's based on your economic upbringing. It's based on just you've overcome some stuff in life.
Yeah.
And that makes you pretty amazing, pretty special. And there's some beauty in that. There's a miracle in the mess
that people fail to recognize.
That we don't
so
take
often.
time to be grateful for. Man, you've come a long way. Look back and remember those things. And those are the moments that allow you to be even more grateful. And even more courageous.
Yeah. I think we're meant to do that, because if we look back on certain experiences, let's say your experience, if 10 is the happiest experience and 1 is the saddest, if you look back on a 6 or 7, often that experience was probably a 5, and you remember it as a 7. So I think that we are, as we progress in our journeys, we're supposed to look back at things and remember the good parts and reinforce ourselves so that we can continue our journey and get something done. I believe that we are all supposed to get things done. And I think that as I'm reading Love is an Inside Job, the theme that keeps coming up to me is that it's really up to you to define your story. Even though my story was different from yours, there were so many things that I could say, well, that's why you felt this way, because my different thing allowed me to feel a similar way. There's a lot of that in the book. I think that's the biggest thing that's going to draw our listeners in. And if they are drawn in because of the tagline of, getting vulnerable with God, great. Yeah. I hope that people can look at their faith with some honesty and some sincerity and challenge it, because that's how you solidify that honesty and that sincerity.
Yeah, thank you for that, John. And I think that, for me, I believe that in every single person that there's this gift in you to the world that is waiting to be expressed at a high level. Mm-hmm. And to express that gift and offer it to the world at a high level, you owe it to yourself to look at the stories that have shaped you and don't serve you well on that journey to showing up at the highest level and offering that gift to the world, so that you can remove those things and be freed up to present your gift to the world at the highest level in every way. And you kind of got to sometimes dig through the stuff that's been piled on top of it that isn't yours, that other people put on you.
I know this is an ongoing challenge in your journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
But here's what you're going to be faced with. Is this your first book?
This is my second.
Your second book. Yeah. Okay. As you progress and your definition truly does begin to evolve, what do you write about next?
I think next up, I'm looking at a leadership book. And when I say leadership, I'm talking about helping people each person find a leader within them, the way you're supposed to lead and show up in the world, and doing that through the lens of your story, and looking at How has your journey, your life story, really been trying to tell you what your gift is?
There's the theme that I think you have. This is your through line. What was your first book about?
It was called God's Graffiti. It was
Okay.
definitely a religious book. It looked at actually 8 people in the Bible, male and female, and showed how they were at-risk teenagers. Like I talk about Modus
Okay.
as a stuttering murderer because he did have a stuttering problem and he did kill somebody. And I was like, and he was a teenager, but he became this leader. And I tell stories of modern day examples of people I've met and some of my story. And I kind of unmask these people and humanize their experiences and say, like this guy Joseph had this dream and his dad was like, man, people like, you don't get to dream like that. You're not better than us.
Yeah.
And like that would suck for anybody, any kid. And then his brothers hated him and resented him for his dream and, beat him up and left him in the desert. And yet he became this great leader. And that said to me, like, wow, look, these were people just like us who, even in our own families, which is sometimes the most painful stuff when our families don't believe in our stories and our dream. And
Which is so common.
so common. And yet we can still pursue that dream. And sometimes it feels like you're alone, but you're not. You just have to find your tribe. As my therapist would tell me, your purpose wants you just as much as you want your purpose. And another friend would say, God wouldn't let you dream it if God didn't think you could do it, right? We have to just show up believing like, yeah, this is for people like me, that I am worthy and I can do this. It does feel like I'm alone sometimes, but my tribe is out there. They're looking for me and I'm looking for them. And I'm not going to have to be alone.
Wow. I'm just pausing because those are some very powerful words. And I would like them to sink in that we are all gifted and that our tribe is looking for us just as much as we are looking for them. That is, I think, your through line in your books, because a lot of times an author, especially one who has had, let's say, a trying upbringing, will come to a book with a story that they retell that has tremendous detail in it. And then when you're done doing that, well, what do you do next? I've told my story. But your story continues. And to hear that the first book that you wrote assigned some practical situations to some biblical figures, I have my own arm wrestling battle with faith that starts with the fact that, faith was forced upon my people. No different than most people.
Yeah.
And once you can wrestle with that, I think you take your journey in faith takes a different turn. For me, it was Rob Bell. And you've spoken
I'm
with
a
Rob.
fan.
You know Rob.
Yeah.
And
I don't know him, but I'm a fan.
well, yes, I am too. We don't hang out, but he's been on the show twice, and we immediately jumped into, Rob, I have a problem, and my problem is, that faith was forced upon my people. How do I reconcile that? And I think you've sort of brought that same kind of practicality that he brings, which is, let's confront it. Let's talk about it. Let's deal with it, because there is some good here. And if you leave this good behind because you can't let go of this thing, then you're missing out. You're missing out a lot. So let's confront this thing. And it's the same that you've said, let's confront it one last time.
Yeah.
And then let's move on. And let's define it in a term that allows you to take advantage of all of the good that you have to give.
Yeah, for me, in both books, Love is an Inside Job, they're honest, hard stories that are things that really happened in my life. And at the end of each one, and here's how you get past this. Here's how I dealt with it. Here's how I'm healing it. That's important because our wounded or broken places, a friend of mine said once, we don't show people our wounds, we show them our scars. When we're wounded, we just bleed all over people and just totally not helpful. She said, we show them our scars because our scars are evidence that healing is possible. Our stories have to end with some good news that create a path or show people at least one path on how to get to the other side of that wound so that it becomes healed and it's a scar. And then you share that story because there's someone out there. You've overcome something in your life that you felt like at the point you were going through it, this is never going to end. I don't know how I'm going to get to the other side of this, but you did. There are thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of people out there going through that very same thing, and they feel like you felt then. You have a story that gives them a roadmap. Here's how I got through that too. For me, I felt like, there are people out there who are dealing with their brokenness. You know the saying, hurt people hurt people. I believe broken people break things. And in our brokenness, we impose that on other people, and then we become the source of their wound. And they're feeling doubt. They're feeling like life isn't going to get better. They're dealing with internal turmoil like I was. And I just believed, I want them to know you're not alone. I know what it's like to be successful financially and have all the stuff and the appearances of what happy's supposed to look like. I call it Facebook happy. But I also know that it doesn't soothe the broken place in you. And I want you to know that it's not an either or. You can have an amazing life internally and externally. You can look at your stuff and not be defined by it and then be able to enjoy it and then realize that whether I had this stuff or not, I'm pretty doggone amazing as a person. I'll say this, John. My thing was I was led to believe that success brought happiness. And I did everything people were said to do. You get a great education, you get a great job. I didn't just get a job. I started my own company. I did well. I worked in politics. I worked with corporate, international nonprofits. And if you do all that, you get all the stuff, man, you'll be happy. And I did it. And then one night at 2:30 in the morning, I was sitting in my kitchen floor crying my eyes out and miserable and realized I'm supposed to be happy and I'm not. Like my real life that people can't see is falling apart. I'm going through a divorce. My kids aren't here with me. I'm miserable. But they told me this stuff would make me happy. And I got to redefine it for myself and find my own path because I want to know what it really feels like. And it didn't mean it had to be an either or proposition. I didn't have to let go of that stuff to receive this internal peace. I just needed to bring the two together and do the hard work of dealing with me so that I could love me and that love not be dependent upon what I had, that it wasn't an exchange, that I could just be fully present, fully whole, and still pursue certain goals in life, but no longer letting those things define how I felt about myself. I say this, the belief is that if I do good, I am good. The reality is any good that you do is evidence of the good that's already in you.
Not the other way around.
Yeah, it's the good flows through you and you evidence that you can see it in the world.
Yeah.
It's not the other way around.
Wow. That is also pretty heavy, and I want to sit on it for a minute because this is one of the things that changes a thought pattern. And we know if we can change a thought pattern, we can change a behavior. If we change a behavior, we can change a result. Yeah. And so what you're doing is you're attacking a lot of negative thought patterns that have been baked into us, over generations, really. And so the book, once again, everybody, is called Love is an Inside Job, Getting Vulnerable with God. Don't get hung up on the God part if you're not into that. You still will absolutely love and be affected by this book, I promise you. If you are a person of faith, then it's going to make you take an honest look at your faith, which you should do all the time. We're rounding third base now, and I want to, again, express that I really hope that, I think that we are, because we're the generation that tells our kids that we love them, because we're the generation that tells each other, our friends, the people we have dear in our lives, that we care about them. And, I mean, we might be making a positive human change in the world, which we're in desperate need of because our population is exploding. If we're all going to coexist, we got to love each other more. But as you continue to guide the emotions of people who are coming out of our generation, you're going to be affecting the emotions and the outlook of a generation ahead of us as well. So if I can look forward 20 years, and if I give give you the scenario that you're going to be a man who has lived through a lot, succeeded a lot, found the way to fulfillment, as opposed to short-term satisfaction, long-term fulfillment. What do you say to the generation that did have some love, some affection, and what do you think your message will be to move that generation forward, knowing that they started off a little ahead of us?
Yeah, I deal with millennials and folks younger than me, and they're doing a lot of amazing good in the world. There's this conference I'll be back in San Francisco attending in October, SoCap, the Social Capital Markets Conference. And the last few years, I've done a session there around self-care and, living your authentic self and all those things, emotional intelligence. And it's standing room only. These are people who are super successful. They're building multi-million-dollar businesses. They're solving global problems, but they're still like, something's missing in me. And what I try to help them understand is that all the good that you do in the world, the things that you offer other people, showing up for them, speaking life to them, being positive, offer it to yourself too. And because you deserve it as much as you believe the world does. And sometimes we pour and pour and pour out, and we don't create the space for other people to pour in, or we don't pour into ourselves. And then we have when we don't do it well, we create for ourselves what I call applaudable addictions. And these are the behaviors of, I work so much because people, you're so good. You're always so busy. Great job. Good job. That was amazing. And we're addicted to being busy. And it's applaudable because it doesn't hurt anyone. You're doing good, but you're addicted to the applause now. And you don't know how to stop and take care of yourself. So all that good you do in the world, all the encouragement and affection and love you offer other people, offer it to yourself too, because you deserve it.
You get on my nerves again. I am addicted to being busy, and I've been called out on it. I mean, like I said, Christy started her journey of therapy, and she's sorting out things that, I don't know what she's doing in there, but I know that the behavior that I can see that has changed is that she looks forward differently. And she started going to therapy because she felt like she was entering a phase in her life, and she wanted some guidance in entering the phase in her life. And I guess she's dragging me in there with her, which I have to be thankful for. But now she's calling me out on things like, you always doing stuff. How about sometimes you do something for you?
You got to question why you do it. Like for me, I was always busy. And for two reasons. One, being still
is
forced
annoying.
me to think about stuff I didn't want to think about.
Okay.
The wounds in me and the fears and anxieties. Being busy was a distraction. The
Wow.
other thing was this.
Well, wait a minute. Don't let me lose the other thing. But first, let me explore this first thing. You're absolutely right. I can put things off. I'm very, very rewarded by my work. But to some degree, some of the things I do are avoidance behavior.
The stuff I don't want to think about. So if I'm busy, I don't have to think about them.
I'll think about it later because I'm busy right now.
And you don't ever want to think about it, so you find another reason to be busy. But here's the other thing. I didn't want to be still because I felt like if I'm not doing something, I'm invisible to the world. The only way I'm going to matter is if I'm doing something that people can see. The number one desire of every human is to feel like we matter, that we desire to be seen and know that we matter and we are appreciated.
Sure.
And we assume that's the only way to matter and be appreciated and affirmed that we are good is to be doing something. When the reality is that you were born good, you were already enough, and anything you do is just an expression and evidence of that truth. So whether you are busy or not, you're enough. But we believe that if I'm not in the meeting, if I'm not at the event, if I'm not producing something, I don't matter to the world. The world won't see me. And that's not true. Give yourself the opportunity to see yourself. and affirm yourself and to value yourself. And then you can show up not competing to prove that you're as good or better than other people, because you don't need to do that. You already know I'm amazing already. I already won, because no one can beat me at being me. And then so anything that I do is just a gift.
What does your background in biology tell you about the fact that we are wired to feel this way? Because from a survival standpoint, if we're valuable to the tribe will allow us to exist there. If that's how we're wired, is it time for us, biologically speaking, to evolve past that?
No, it's you were born valuable to the tribe. The assumption is that your value starts with what you do. No. Because you were born with value, anything that you produce is already evidence of the value that was in you. You were born with the value. You didn't go out and create your value. You were born with it, and you created the expression of that value. So there's nothing wrong with this idea of the human survival and the value we bring to the tribe. It's when we make it toxic and then say, my value has to be better than your value, or we start comparing. And we get into this, there's a saying, comparison is the thief of joy. And that's why we end up with Facebook depression and all these things, because we start comparing our lives and comparing and competing. And we never stop to believe that I don't have to compare and compete, that when I honor me and value myself, that I can honor and value other people.
So when we do things that are, let's say athletic pursuits or musical pursuits, I mean, I played the drums for many years, and then I stopped and raised my boys, and now I'm getting back to it, and I'm realizing, man, I'm terrible. It's a struggle just to kind of feel my way back to being able to express with others and join a conversation and be valuable to a conversation. But I've forgotten that I can just be joyful in the fact that I'm building a skill that I like, and that it belongs in my heart space, as you describe it, to just love it. I've forgotten all about that.
To just love it, and then teach other people how to love it. And when you're dealing with younger people who are now playing the drums, you have a journey and a story to share that you can now offer them as your gift, right? As your wisdom about this journey. So maybe I'm not, different things I used to do. Maybe I'm not as good as some things as I used to be, but I've gained a lot of wisdom that I can share, and that's the new gift to the people who are coming behind me. So I don't have to compete and compare. I can love what I love and then offer back, hey, here's what I learned. Here's my story. Let me tell you a story. And that's what we love about, our elders, right? The stories they tell us that stick and show up in our lives, because it's like, oh, someone shared this with me, and now I know how to navigate this part of life.
Okay, so let me, I want to tell you about my grandfather, who I loved for the stories, and everything that he said had a drop of wisdom in it that I'll never forget, and everything that he imparted on us was something that is a gem that I treasure. Now, was he a complete and whole and always caring and compassionate kind of man? I'm sure he had his moments. But that's not what I remember. What I remember is the wisdom he left behind, and what he did for a living. He was a body and fender man. I never even knew that. So I think to punctuate your point, I will say that what he left behind for us was, a scattering pile of anecdotes and wisdom and truths and love and affection, and all of that together was what he left behind. I even didn't know. I had to ask my dad whatever it was he did for a living, because I never knew it. So I would like for our listeners to understand that, and to understand that that's what is embedded in Love is an Inside Job, which is that what you do and who you are can be defined by you, and doesn't have to necessarily be defined by, what you did and how successful you were at your job and your, because you are something to people that you can either consciously decide to define or let flounder. And if you let it flounder, maybe you get lucky.
Yeah.
And you leave behind happy people.
And we do get lucky. We have those gifts of grace where we didn't show up fully present, but even in spite of us, we were a gift. My thing is,
in spite of us,
you were you in spite of ourselves sometimes, in spite of yourself, you're still a gift, even when you're not trying to be, to people that you don't even realize sometimes. But yeah, you're right. You get to shape your legacy. And my question, sometimes, what will I leave behind that will outlive me? What will I leave for my children, for the world, for society that will outlive me? What's the story that will be told? The impact that I had, the good that I did, and how I treated people. Because you can do a lot of good, but if you don't treat people well, your 6 words still might not be that good in terms of what they say.
Yeah.
And you can have talent, you can be gifted, but at the end of the day, people always remember how they were treated by you. And so when I walk away from any situation, I walk in first mindful of, I get to determine the story I leave behind about me. So I'm in control of that. No matter what this interaction is about, no matter what they say or do, I control my narrative. And so when I walk away, I know what story I left behind. And so every interaction is a part of your story, a part of your legacy. And I walk in saying, I already know the story about me that I'm leaving in this room. And so that's how I show up. And I think I encourage people to show up that way. Every interaction, you're leaving behind a legacy of who you are in the world with that person. If they never see you again and somebody says, hey, you ever heard of John, this guy, he has a podcast? You already know because of how you showed up with whoever that was, what they get to say.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I'll tell you what, man. Let's see. We've probably talked on the phone for a couple hours total. We've probably texted each other 250 words. And I've known you personally in your presence for about 2.5 hours. But I cannot tell you how I could possibly measure what effect you've had on my life with your work, with your attitude, and now with our practically brand new personal friendship.
Yeah.
I love you.
I love you back, man.
And I'm looking forward to the great success of this book and to you touching many, many lives and to shaping a lot of people into realizing what their gift is.
I appreciate that. And thank you for having me on the show and inviting me into your home and breakfast and just getting to know you. When we get off the show, I'll tell you some of the things you've left with me already just through the stories you've shared this morning about your journey that have made me say, that's a missing piece for me.
Huh.
Yeah.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Romal Tune.
All right.